one? All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Martin, and actually I'm going to get my little cheat sheet over here because it's a long story and I don't want to get lost. So. I would like to thank Carl and Mr. O'Shea for thinking of us this year, and especially in this year of faith that we get to stand up here and profess our faith to a wonderful Catholic school like Servite. Servants of Mary, a big part of our life, and some background information on myself, just to explain the nature of myself and the difference between my son. When you get a son, I don't know about you fathers out there, but I didn't want him to be anything like me. Yeah. I had quite a different upbringing. I was raised in South Central Los Angeles on 71st in Vermont. I don't know if you've been in that neighborhood lately, but blonde hair and blue eyes wasn't real fashionable down there. And my mother passed away when I was 6 years old, and by the time I was 10, I was a pretty tough kid. And the way I dealt with everything is aggressively and violently and attack. And for football dads out there, I'm a strong safety by nature. And God gave me a running back, and he tries to elude, and I try to attack, and pretty much our relationship. And we did a lot of our talking was through football. I mean, I'm a football dad extraordinaire. I'm probably the worst in a bad way, is how important it is to me. But that's how we communicated, and that's how we got along, and I was blessed to get a prodigy for a son with gifts in football and track and academically. Like I said, he's nothing like me. I used to work real hard for my C's. You know. My dad would say, "What do these D's and F's mean?" I'd say, doing fine, doing fine. You know. But I'd be more akin to be a St. Paul's guy, and so we do want the best for our children. So of course I wanted him to go to Servite. But I went to St. Bernard's and played over it. And the story is, there's scripture themes running all through it, and prodigal sons is one of them, starting with me. If you would have told me 10 years ago that from this day that, oh, don't worry, Mr. Martin, you're going to be standing here at Servite and sharing a wonderful story, I would have thought that was quite a funny joke. And a funnier joke if you would have said, and you're going to be in your 11th year of sobriety, that would have been even funnier yet. So without turning into an AA meeting, which I would have to start by saying, my name is Chris and I'm an alcoholic, and you'd all have to say, hi Chris, how you doing? You know. But that's still true. But what AA did for me was get me to my base belief system, which is Catholicism. And so that's what I do now, and what I like better is that our faith has 7 sacraments, and AA has 12 steps. So I say 5 right there, and that's reducing my carbon footprint, so to speak. That's much better. Just to tell you a little bit how fanatical I was about football, I was introduced to Servite through my wife. We went to Cornelia Conley, so we settled out here in Placentia. And my brother John Martin, he's our local Marist booster and Union College booster. His son was here. John, you just met and introduced us. And he said to me back in the 80s that you guys had a football player named Derek Brown here, and he was a sensational running back. He holds all your records. And he said, you got to come see this kid. And I wasn't into it at the time. I was done with football, and I said, what do I want to go see a high school running back for? And so he said, you got to see him. And my wife was pregnant with my son, and after I went to his first game and got a glimpse of him, I was coming home, and I said, I'm going to name my son Conor Derek Brown Martin. And she said, well, who's Derek Brown? I said, well, he's a running back at Servite High School, and we had a fight over that, and you can imagine. And I said, but it was a familiar fight, because a year earlier I wanted to name my daughter Kristen Dick Buckus Martin, and I lost that one too. We went with Kristen Aaron Martin. So just to give you an idea that, but I wasn't going to put any pressure on my son to, follow your footsteps and play football and all that stuff. But Conor's early years, he would come home from the park and playing all dirty and playing tackle football. And I said, you're playing football? Who with? And he named the guys, and I said, well, they're pretty old. What grade are they in? They're 3 and 4 years older than him. And I said, well, how'd you do? He said, well, I did great. They call me Soap. I go, Soap? Why? He goes, they can't get me. Can't tackle me. So he wanted to play Pop Warner, so I rushed him down there to the coach's house. And I apologized for it being 3 in the morning, and I was pretty excited to see him going. And lo and behold, first time he touched the ball as a Pop Warner kid, he just took off 50 yards for a touchdown and really didn't get the handle on it, so he hauled it down here like a sack of potatoes on his shoulder and went to the house. And just was, you know, proved in track he was a phenomenon. I call him, he was the world's fastest white boy, and I tell him that's the good ghetto genes. Well, once removed, that's why he can fly. And then as a personal, to talk about Conor's personality, he was so different from me, and calm and kind, and never in any scrapes at school or anything like that. So I used to call him Ferris Bueller when he was a kid. Yeah, I mean, he was just, if you know that movie, everybody in the neighborhood loved him. I'm talking about young kids to the old men at the post office. He's 75 years old. I've been going there 20 years, and when Conor would go in, hello, Conor, and hello, Mr. So-and-so. You know, everybody loved him, and it was difficult on weekends. I was divorced, and then on my weekends, I'd go to the house, and my daughter would come out right on cue, but you know, the routine was the same. Every week I had to go find Conor and find out what house he was in. And the parents would come out and always the same. You know, Billy wants to know if Conor can spend the weekend with us. And I'd have to say, no, you know, it is Christmas, and, you know, I bought him a present, and I'd like to, you know, introduce myself to my son, but thank you for asking. Maybe next year. And but anyway, as he progresses along, Conor's very literal-minded, and I'm very, what's the word is, I think outside the box, and Conor everything's black and white, so we have a communication breakdown when we talk. So I asked him when he gets in the car one time, he was about 6th grade, and I say, well, when's the report cards coming out? He goes, well, they're coming out next week. And I asked him, well, what's the report card going to look like? And he said, it's a blue piece of paper about this big. You know, and he goes, oh, all A's, all A's. And I said, well, good, because when they fall, the grades fall, then I know we've got problems. And I didn't know how prophetic that was going to be, but I know that for a fact, that that's your first sign, parents. When they lose interest in things that they once loved, when the grades fall, and their friends change, you can go through feel free to go through their drawers and address the issue. But anyway, Conor was destined for Servite. He's got 3 cousins that attended, and by being a football kid, I did have to be honest and ask him if he wanted to go to Mater Dei. I'm sorry, you know. And Conor said, no, Dad, I'm going to be on the first team that beat Mater Dei, because they're right in the middle of that dry spot. I said, okay, you're a friar. And we came here with high expectations, and he didn't disappoint. As soon as Conor got here, his freshman team, they were 7-2, and Conor was the MVP, and he was lighting it up. And in track, he was the fastest freshman in the Trinity League, and was, you know, did well in track, and we made varsity as a sophomore. And that's when, as a wide receiver and returning kicks, and that's when my devotion to St. Peregrine came into play. And I found a Servite flyer in the lobby, and I read about St. Peregrine and how he had cancer on his leg, and I said, well, let's, you know, show some devotion to one of the founders. And simultaneously, I received a St. Benedict medal from my sister, and I read the story about St. Benedict, so I would invoke before football games and update their job description. St. Peregrine, I'd say, well, we don't have cancer on the leg, but we're going to pray to you to take care of my son's legs during games. And St. Benedict, one of the things I read about him is he used to cast out demons. I said, well, I don't know how that's going to play, but we'll make him the patron saint of cheap shots. Keep cheap shots off my boy. So we pray. I mean, it ties in with my OCD, I guess, but pray Peregrine and Benedict and before games, and we did this ritually. So things are going right along, and Conor's you know, well received and a star here at Servite, and junior year things started going a little south, and I checked his grades. It was after, I got to make a confession, after they hit their first round loss his junior year to Eisenhower, I'm sorry, out in San Bernardino. You know, like my dad, I didn't think he got enough touches. We could have won the game if they would have given my boy the ball more. I'm feeling like that, and I'm fanatical, and I'm a little upset about the way things are going, and get involved. So I'm going to go check his grades right after that loss, and with the intent of moving him over to that red and white school. I was that mad that we lost. So I asked Conor, how do you think you look in red and white? And I'm not the first dad to do it or think about it, you know. And he said, and he just sighed, "What? Can't beat him, join him." And I can tell he didn't want any part of it. But the grades, right when I saw the grades, I had suspected that he was, you know, getting involved with marijuana because the grades were going down, his attitude was changing, and he wasn't available, all these things. But when I saw the grades, I knew it's like I got punched in the stomach. I'd already been sober for a year, and I absolutely knew why. So I was coming to Servite every day before the Christmas break, trying to get the Dean of Discipline to drug test him. They had a drug, I don't know what the policy is now for you guys, but Monday mornings that they would test after first period or first period. And I said, you got to test him, you got to test him. And he says, well, it's random, and we can't just grab a kid. And I said, okay, well, randomly test him Monday, and I'll be here to randomly grab him by the ear and randomly take him into the bathroom and make sure he tests. But so I called that day, and they told me they had bad news. I said, well, what's that? They said, well, Conor just was caught smoking marijuana in the parking lot. And I told you so. So this set off a year of trials and tribulations that I hope none of you ever have to go through, and I'm sure you won't. But so at the expulsion meeting, Conor and his mother show up with a restraining order from me from the court. I'm a year sober, and things aren't real good at his house. You know, the drinking's involved on a regular basis with the stepfather and the mother, and now I get a chance to help, and I have a restraining order. I have to stay 150 yards away from my son. I can't contact him by phone. I can't get a message to him through a third party. So I got to start my court battle. I'm going to court, and things go from bad to worse for Conor. He went to get some more pot after 2 weeks, and the guy who provides him says, well, I'm out of that. Why don't you try this? It's called crystal methamphetamine. That's in 2 weeks. 2 weeks after that, his first arrest. You know, he needs to break into coin-operated laundromat to get money. You know, I still can't reach him or touch him, so I'm fighting to get custody and getting no help. It just was, looking back on it, it all had to come to pass. Everything happens for a reason. God did everything for a reason. And I was thinking that he's paying for the sins of his father, and it scared me to death, because I know how I was, and I'm running out of time. We're trying to get a kid help, never mind you know, your athletic career, but I don't want to give that up either. So late in March, it was my last chance to go fight to get the restraining order removed and custody of my son, so we can get back to work and salvage his life and his high school diploma, and, you know, hopefully his athletic career. And I was living out in near past Barstow. I was working in a family business. We had a gas station out by Baker, California, and we're 175 miles away. And that was a good thing, because I would get upset with Conor in the middle of the night, and if I was close by, it would have been a problem. But I would jump in the freeway and drive through the night, and by the time I got here, I sometimes mellow out. But I'd pray the rosary the whole time while I was driving. I mean, I am at war. I'm with the unseen. No one believes me, but I knew it, and it was just me against all the demons, and personal, and it was very, very difficult. But what happened was I went home after I got denied from a Superior Court judge. It's a woman that told me, she said, Mr. Martin, I'm going to keep this restraining order in place, and you're to stay away from your son 150 yards, and believe me, I'll put you in jail if you break any of these parameters. And don't worry, you'll get your son back in 10 years. And he won't graduate high school, and you love him enough that don't worry, in 10 years everything's going to be right. Well, she's right over one thing, and in 10 years we're fine. But I had a better idea. I'm going to kidnap him and take him out of state. Yeah, that's what I'm going to break the restraining order a little bit. And then and I would do things like I'd be out at Razor Road where we had the business, middle of the night, jump in that car. I'm going to scare Conor. You know, I don't want him settling in using drugs and getting real comfortable and enjoying it. So it's like shock therapy. So I would drive 175 miles through the night praying the rosary the whole time. I knew where all the houses were, where he hung out with his homies, and I would just light up the tires and jump out like a cop and bang on doors, and I could hear doors out the back and people running, and then I'd jump in the car because I just broke a restraining order and jump on the freeway, drive 175 miles back. And I would do this from time to time. And later on, after we, things were on the good, and I said, did I ever, hit the mark when I was banging on doors? And he goes, oh my God, I ruined many of parties. And actually, I saw a friend of Conor's from those days who actually pulled out of it, and he's doing pretty well now. He thanked me, thank you, Mr. Martin, for getting me off drugs. And I said, pardon me? He says, yeah, you scared the mess out of Conor so bad, I quit too. I call that residual grace. I just know how to aim it, and if you're in the neighborhood, you're going to catch it. So that was a nice little bonus. So that definitely was my low point. But in this in the football program, I was reading it, and it was from St. John Bosco game in 2001, and I was just feeling bad, and I was crying and going through it because during that game he was a sophomore. They moved him from wide receiver to running back, and he just lit the place up. He had 31 carries and scored a touchdown that got called back, and it would have won the game, but he had 200 yards rushing, and just really came into his own, and I was just knowing this is what we're throwing away, what I'm going to lose. And there's an ad, a full-page ad in the flyer. It's a devotion to our Blessed Mother on First Saturday devotion. And the headline, the tagline is, when you pray the rosary, the power of God is in your hands. And I said, so I read the novena, I'm all in. This is late March. And what you do is, for 5 months on First Saturday, you go to confession, you pray the rosary, and receive the Eucharist. Do that for 5 months. Right away I got on, I go, well, heck, it's April coming up in a couple of days. April, May, June, July, August. I can finish in August, and I need a miracle. And lo and behold, I did that devotion, and 3 days, 4 days after I finished, Conor called me, and he was willing to turn himself into me. And what I was going to do is I was going to take him up to Reno, Nevada, where I had a friend that he had a successful sports bar and a big house, and he said, come on in and stay with us. And he actually was a football coach in the NFL Europe. And so I knew Conor's going to be getting serious dose of football 24/7. I said, if I can get him, we'll be there. But anyway, I hadn't seen Conor for months, and he called, and so the day we're going up there, and all these emotions. And when I pulled up to his house, and when he came out of the house, last time I saw him, he was 160 pounds of muscle and a track star. He weighed about 120 pounds, and from the distance, when I laid eyes on him, your mom might understand this, that I opened the car door and I got sick. But we started heading up to Reno, and we had pleasantries in the car. Hi, how you doing? Miss you. Got on the freeway, and it was on. We were screaming at each other, making up dirty words. We ran out of dirty words. He was calling me so many things. That's not even a dirty word. We can get, and for hours, I don't even remember driving. I'm going up 395 to Reno, and I don't even know who's driving the car. We were screaming at each other, and finally I go, I'm the sober one here. I'm the dad. I don't need to be doing this. But I was running out of things to say to him. Nothing. He's not hearing anything. He's just screaming. I don't recognize him. He's red as a tomato. His hair standing on end. And so I said, you better cool it, because I'm about ready to go Abraham on you right now. And he said, who's Abraham? And I said, oh, you don't know your Old Testament now, do you? I'm up in Lone Pine. It's the mountains. I said, well, Abraham, God talked to Abraham. He had an only son. He loved him. He said, if you love me, sacrifice your son up at the mountain. And I said, it looked just like that mountain right here. And Conor, and then I said, well, that's silly. Yeah. And I look at Conor, and he's calm. His hair's laying down, his color's back, he's smiling, and it looks like the kid I know. He just looked at me and pointed up the road and says, let's go to Reno. As soon as we get there to Reno and we get adjusted at my buddy's house, and I have to track down the head of the NIAA, which is the equivalent of the CIF president in Southern California. He's the president of the all high school sports in Nevada, and I prepared my case for a hardship to allow him to play football. And the gentleman's name was Dr. Hughes, and he was very understanding, because he pointed at a picture on the wall. He said, I'm going to give your son a chance, Mr. Martin. And see that guy on the wall? And he goes, yeah, that's my son. And he died of alcoholism at 27 years old, and he was an all-state running back. And he wished me, all the luck in the world. He knew I was up against. So he was a very special man with a special understanding. So, and Reno High was 11-1 the year before, and they were the best in the state, and yeah, it wasn't going to be easy. I looked at some of the kids that they had playing there, and they had 9 kids on defense play at the next level. Arizona State, Fresno State, Boise State, and they were for real. And I said, oh God, I know Conor's going to get to be the dummy running back at practice, and these are the guys on defense that are going to, tear him up. But I knew that as soon as he got in shape that they'd have a respect for him, and it didn't take him very long. This guy's quick. I mean, I've seen him bound over a 12-foot wall, and you can't catch him in a phone booth. So, but that was something that I had to do, and eventually we relaxed as Conor started doing better. His weekly reports, he had to take a progress report, every week to be eligible to play football. And if one teacher had anything negative to say, he would have lost his opportunity. He would have been done completely. But every week it was just great news. I'd wait for the facts at the athletic office, and it came back glowing, and he was getting straight A's and being who he's supposed to be. And about the 4th game of the season, there's these studs that were walking around Reno High were losing football games, and they're losing them by 1 point, 2 points. And so finally he was working himself into shape, and the coach puts him in at running back. And Conor, flashed right away. He started getting his 100 yards plus and a few carries. And one game against an inferior team, 5 carries, 148 yards, and 2 touchdowns, and sat him down. And then everybody in Reno started taking notice. And there was a Servite connection. Coach Toner had a cousin up in Reno, and he called Coach Toner. I find this after the fact. And he says, hey, there's a kid up here, Coach, that says his name's Conor Martin from Servite High School. Well, Coach Toner figured he's AWOL. He's supposed to be a senior here. And he says, you got Conor Martin up there? And he says, yeah. He said, well, if you got our Conor Martin, and he's doing the right things, watch out. And sure enough, the struggle, Conor had a lot of difficulties too. It wasn't just an easy ride. He fought through a lot of adversity. He got up there with a broken hand from getting in a fist fight with his stepfather in the spring, and it wasn't healed by the fall. The second game, in a pregame warm-up, the linebacker that was heading for Fresno State almost separated his shoulder. And then when he was playing against the best team in the state at the time, right before halftime, he was doing his thing, and it was a tie score, 14-14. He already had 100 yards, and a weird fall, and he got a grade 1 tear of an MCL. And that could have been it. But the last 2 games of the season, if they won, they would get into the playoffs with a 4-5 record, and for the first time in the history of Nevada football, a team got in with a losing record. But they did. They got in the playoffs with the worst record in the history of Nevada, and as a reward, you get to play the best team in the state. So, and the team they had to play was called McQueen. They lost earlier to McQueen, they were the state champions year in, year out, and they were Reno High's personal modern day. Reno High has never beat them. So, I used to put the St. Benedict medal in Conor's shoulder pad to keep the cheap shots off him. And then I said, before the playoffs, I said, Conor, you want to put the Benedictine medal in your shoulder pad? He said, yeah, let's do it. And he doubled his outfit. In the McQueen game, the coach just took off the wraps, and 30 carries and 210 yards and 2 touchdowns sent McQueen home. And it was a beautiful sight because Reno rushed the field. Now I know we're cooking because he's in shape, and I know what I've got. I got the story of Seabiscuit. I got a little horse, and I know this sucker can run, so everything's getting better, and the town's starting to love him, and everywhere he goes, and all of a sudden my name changed from Chris to there's Mr. Conor. Anyway, in the playoffs, just real quick, they got to play 3 teams that they had lost to earlier without Conor participating. And they got to face all 3 of them, and he rectified all 3. The second week, they played at Lake Tahoe. Everybody came to see the other running back who had over 2,000 yards rushing, and Reno shut that kid down for about 50 yards, and Conor had 253 yards and 3 touchdowns while playing with the flu. And then the next week, they got to play the team that hurt his MCL 1 month earlier. In a driving snowstorm. And Conor had 3 touchdowns and a 98-yard touchdown run in a blizzard, and reversed the score, 34-14, beat them by 20 points. That's a 40-point swing in 1 month. And then they made it to the state and state playoffs. And in the state playoff game, right before that game, he had, on a Wednesday, he came home with double pink eye. It just never stopped, one thing after another, and his eyes cleared up like the morning of the game. It might be tough for a running back to have double pink eye in any situation. And then we make it to the playoffs, the state championship game. It's all hitting me real, starting to catch up with me. And the Thursday evening before the state championship game, I'm going to the practice as I usually do, and I still have fear that, if some kid's going to self-sabotage, here's his opportunity. I'm worried that he bolts under the pressure. And sure enough, I go to practice and I can't see him, and I'm about ready to collapse. And then I see a crowd and all the media cameras and stuff, and the crowd was all around Conor in the middle, and here's a kid that doesn't say much ever. And he's holding court, and I see him blabbing, and they're holding up the mics, and he's telling the whole story, all about his trials and tribulations. And then the guy that wrote the story in the newspaper, he came over to me, and I see him, he's going to come to talk to me, and the reporter looked at me and says, wow. And I said, yeah, wow. That's an understatement. But I told Conor later, I said, Conor, the Reno Gazette Journal has a circulation of 1 million papers. So I said, I go in rooms with a group of small guys, and we tell our sins, in a small group. I said, you just told 1 million people. He said, yeah, I just want to get it done in one fell swoop. The game comes, and we're playing Las Vegas High School against Reno High School for the state championship. They're undefeated. We've had one common opponent who they beat by 31 more points than we did. So it wasn't looking good for Reno at that point. But one more injury right before the game on a Thursday. He had a major hematoma on his leg, and so I did my stuff. We prayed on it, and we invoked St. Peregrine, take care of your legs here. Went to a vein specialist, and they did a sonogram on it, and he said there's no sign of any damage ever. So that's our boy. Peregrine hooked us up, and the doctor said, who? We said, long story. We'll come back and we'll get you next time, doctor. So, another miracle. Anyway, long story short, in a crazy game, if you know anything about football, there's a statistic that when a team blocks a punt and scores a touchdown as a result, the team that blocks the punt for a touchdown wins 80% of the time. Las Vegas blocked 2 punts for touchdowns against Reno. Virtually, if you're an atheist coach, you've got to, understand that, that's pretty much a slam dunk. And Reno pulled off the victory and won the state 26-23. Well, Conor wrapped it up, long story short. In the playoffs, he had 7 state records for rushing during the playoffs, from 911 yards in 5 games, and the 98-yard touchdown was the longest, and the most points scored, 12 touchdowns, and on and on. And then after the game, of course, I lose him to fame of a high school football star. And I don't know what it is about Reno High School, but they're the most beautiful young ladies I've ever seen in my life. And I go, man, we're going to lose him now. And he was always, everywhere he went, there's a crowd. And I just let him immerse himself in that. That's a well-deserved reward. And a couple years passed after graduation, and he comes back to Orange County, and he's trying to, find his way. But now he's 18. I have a different approach. I got to get back to business of keeping my own side of the street clean, and I'll be there for you. You know where to go if you have any problems. And he's kind of finding his way and not doing much. And I turned 50 in 06. And he says, "What do you want for your 50th birthday?" Well, it was the 5th month of the novena that I continued on first Saturday. I said, "Why don't you come to my sister who lives out in San Dimas and do my devotion with me? Come pray the rosary, go to confession, and receive the Eucharist." And so he did. And like I always say, God doesn't call you on the cell phone, but he does talk to us like this, because the name of the church was the Holy Name of Mary. And my birthday is on October 14th, but this was the Saturday before, which is October 7th, which is the feast day of the Holy Rosary. So these are little things that line up that let you know that you're not pulling the sled, you're on the sled, and God's driving. And it's not by sight that I went, it was by faith. And soon after that, Conor began going to school in earnest, knocking out the A's, and lo and behold, found his way to the seminary in St. Benedict, Oregon. So St. Benedict got his in there for all this. And he graduated in the seminary last spring with high honors and bachelor's degree in philosophy. And here we are, sir, by 10 years later, telling you that everything turned out pretty good. We're going to be all right. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my son, who I'm so proud of, and my hero, and your fellow friar, Conor Martin.
I know we're running out of time here, and I want to receive the Eucharist just as much as all you, so I'm going to try to speed up a little bit, but go as fast as we can. Now, when I open up the scriptures at home, I always like to start off with a little prayer, and that's exactly what I'm going to do with you guys right now. We're going to open up the scriptures a little bit, and we're going to dive right on in. So in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Speak, Lord, for your servants are listening. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. As Jesus was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a sizable crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind man, son of Timaeus, sat by the roadside begging. On hearing that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out, "Jesus, son of David, have pity on me." And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he kept calling out all the more, "Son of David, have pity on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take courage, get up. He is calling you." He threw aside his cloak, he sprang up, and he came to Jesus. Jesus said to him in reply, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man replied to him, "Master, I want to see." Jesus told him, "Go your way. Your faith has saved you." Immediately, he received his sight and followed him on the way. That was from Mark chapter 10, verses 46 through 52. A few years ago, the Associated Press printed a true and tender story that was carried by newspapers across the nation. It was a story of a 15-year-old boy named Christopher Collins and the selfless love he had for his mother and younger sister. From the time Chris was a mere child, he was the man of the house, a youngster who carried responsibilities and burdens far beyond his years. You see, Christopher's mother was legally blind and was a recluse because of her condition. She was abandoned by her husband when both her kids were very young. Some nights, young Christopher would stay up all night with his mother when she was frightened or depressed or simply needing conversation and encouragement. In addition, he cared for his young sister, making her breakfast, getting her ready for school, packing her favorite lunches, and even braiding her hair. Young Christopher also brought home $20 a week from his after-school job to augment his family's meager income. Following a particularly difficult night with his mother, he went into her room, hugged her tight, and said, "Don't worry, Mom. I will never leave you. I will always be your eyes." Christopher's words were profoundly mature, but they were also prophetic. For just hours after Christopher told his mother this on his way to school, he was struck by an automobile and died a few days later from his injuries. Out of this tragic story, an unexpected miracle emerged. Just hours after he died, his mother Sally underwent delicate eye surgery and received the corneas from her deceased son's eyes. Mrs. Collins got to see the face of her beautiful daughter for the very first time. Out of her sadness and grieving, a new gift of life was given. Young Christopher Collins, he had made good on his promise. "Don't worry, Mom. I will always be your eyes." In this gospel reading I just read to you, we meet a blind beggar, Bartimaeus, who becomes a disciple of the Lord
following the restoration of his sight. This gospel is very much like a detailed portrait painted by St. Mark, which offers insight into the meaning of Christian discipleship. It's filled with particular meaning for me, considering the many trials I went through. But it's my hope too that you will see yourself somewhere in this gospel reading. I'm going to extract 6 points from this gospel scene that stuck out to me. The first detail I want to point out to you is one that is often overlooked. It's the role of the crowd. It's the role of the crowd in the gospel. We have to remember that it's the role of the crowd. It's the crowd that attempts to dissuade Bartimaeus from meeting our Lord. It's the crowd that attempts to silence him. The crowd is nothing more than unadorned peer pressure. Bartimaeus' faith journey begins. It begins by going against the grain, refusing to be silenced or diverted by the masses. The more they pressure him, the more animated he becomes, hoping to capture the attention of our Lord Jesus Christ. Your call and mine is not unlike the call of Bartimaeus. Our call as Christian disciples requires courage and conviction and a willingness to go against the strong currents of today's culture and society. In order to live our lives to the full, in freedom, we must overcome the test that this freedom entails. Temptation. Only through the obedience of faith that opens our hearts to the truth. Credo um telegam, it's right on our crest. I believe so that I may understand. Only through the obedience of faith that opens our hearts to the truth can we be freed from the slavery of falsehood and find the full meaning of our lives and attain peace, love, and joy. The second detail I call to your attention is Bartimaeus' reaction when he learns that our Lord Jesus Christ was in fact calling him. The gospel has it that he sprang up. He sprang up and came to Jesus. Bartimaeus' response, it was not tentative, it was not timid. No, on the contrary, he's pumped. He's extremely excited. This kind of attitude, this kind of excitement is a necessary condition for anyone who's called to Christian discipleship and leadership. The church needs men and women who have fire in their belly and zeal for the gospel. Those who allow themselves to be fascinated by Christ cannot fail to witness to the joy of following in his footsteps. Third point I want to point out, Jesus asked Bartimaeus, "What do you want me to do for you?" Bartimaeus' 5-word response is, "Master, I want to see." Robert Barron says that Christianity is above all else a way of seeing. An encounter with Jesus Christ changes the way we see. Your charge as men of the church and women is to help people to see no longer with physical eyes, but with the eyes of the heart. We must help them. We must free them from spiritual blindness. from an exaggerated sense of self, from violence, from hatred, and from the culture of death. Your charge is to lead others to Christ and to transform culture and society in light of the gospel. The fourth point I want to bring up, Bartimaeus' relationship with Jesus begins with a plea for mercy. Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me. Every person who wishes to follow Christ begins first by acknowledging their own sinfulness.
There is no forgiveness without the desire for forgiveness.
Without opening the heart to forgiveness. Only divine forgiveness, divine love, received with an open and sincere heart, can give us the strength to resist evil and to follow Him on the way. We must let ourselves be struck by God's love so that it becomes our strength. The fifth point. Bartimaeus rose up, cast aside his garments, and began to follow Jesus. Now the cloak or cloth or garment referred to in this reading is likely the blanket Bartimaeus spread before himself to receive other coins and offerings. So what's the parallel? The parallel is the disciples who cast aside their fishing nets. The call of Jesus caused Bartimaeus to set his old way aside and to walk literally on the pathway of the Lord. In a word, discipleship is a radical change of life. A radical change of life where the old man or woman is set aside and the new man or woman is created in relationship to the Master. This last and final detail falls under the category of speculative theology. Bartimaeus emerges as a transfigured man who likely became a long-standing disciple of the Lord. The Anchor Bible suggests that Mark recorded his name for posterity because he was a steady disciple and leader in the early church. Oh, Bartimaeus, he truly is a living example of perseverance and tenacity. Someone who stayed with the cause despite the trials of Jerusalem and the suffering of Calvary. We are to be no less. Amazing grace. How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, and now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity. Let's celebrate the Holy Eucharist together.